Commander Jiwan stood in the main briefing room of the Alterian command ship, watching the data screens display information about their new allies. The humans had been part of the Galactic Council for only 6 months, and most species still treated them like curious pets rather than equals. The Alterians were different. They had built their reputation on 300 years of perfect military victories. Every battle was planned down to the smallest detail. Every move was calculated. Every outcome was predicted. This was why the Council always called them when things got serious. Today's mission seemed simple enough. The Vrak Collective had taken over a mining colony on Kepler 442b. The Vrak were bugs, basically. Big, scary bugs that made up for their lack of brains with huge numbers. They had been using the same attack patterns for thousands of years. Fighting them was like solving a math problem that everyone already knew the answer to. The door to the briefing room opened, and Jiwan got her first look at the human military unit that would be working with her forces. 5 humans walked in, wearing uniforms that looked clean but somehow different from what she expected. Their leader was a man who appeared to be in his 30s with dark hair and calm eyes. "Commander Jiwan," the human said, extending his hand in the strange human greeting ritual. "I'm Captain Minho Kim. Thank you for having us on this operation." Jiwan touched his hand briefly, noting how warm human skin felt compared to her own. "Captain Kim, I have read your files. Your species has an interesting military history." "That's one way to put it," Minho replied with what humans called a smile. "My team is ready to follow your lead. We're here to learn." The other humans introduced themselves. Sergeant Hyok was a big man with scars on his hands and a way of standing that reminded Jiwan of a coiled spring. Private Nari looked young, but had sharp eyes that seemed to notice everything. Lieutenant Siak appeared calm and spoke little, but when he did talk, the other humans listened carefully. There was also Corporal Jinwoo, who handled communications and seemed friendly enough, though Jiwan noticed he kept checking small devices that weren't part of standard military equipment. "Let me explain the situation," Jiwan began, activating the holographic display that showed the mining colony. "The Vrak took this facility 3 days ago. They are using their standard formation, outer defensive ring here, secondary positions here, and their command structure will be in the main mining complex." She pointed to different areas as she spoke. "We will attack in 3 waves. First wave eliminates outer defenses. Second wave takes the middle positions. Third wave secures the command center. The entire operation should take no more than 4 hours." Captain Minho studied the display carefully. "What if they've changed their tactics?" The question surprised Jiwan. The Vrak do not change tactics. They have used the same strategies for 3,000 years. It is what makes them predictable. "But they took this colony pretty fast," Sergeant Hyok said. "Faster than usual, according to the reports." "They had more numbers than expected," Jiwan explained. "Nothing more?" Lieutenant Seok leaned forward. "Have there been any other unusual Vrak attacks recently? Different patterns, new behaviors?" Jiwan felt a small irritation. These humans asked too many questions about things that did not matter. The Vrak are insects. They do not learn. They do not adapt. They follow their programming like machines. "Right," Minho said, but something in his voice suggested he was not convinced. "What about civilian casualties? Any survivors in the colony?" "Unknown. The Vrak typically kill all non-useful life forms immediately." Jiwan moved to the next part of her briefing. "Your unit will support our second wave. Stay close to my soldiers and follow their lead. This is not complicated." The humans exchanged glances. It was quick, but Jiwan noticed it. There was some kind of communication happening between them that she could not understand. "We appreciate the opportunity to serve alongside the legendary Alterian forces," Minho said. "If I may ask, how many Vrak operations have you handled?" 43 successful missions against Vrak forces, 0 defeats." Jiwan felt proud, stating this fact. "My unit has never lost a battle against any enemy." "Impressive," Private Nari said. "What was the largest Vrak force you've faced?" "Approximately 50,000 individuals. We defeated them with minimal casualties. Ji-won did not understand why these details mattered to the humans. And they all fought the same way? Corporal Jinwoo asked. Of course, as I explained, they do not change. The humans went quiet for a moment. Ji-won continued her briefing, showing them weapon specifications, timeline details, and emergency procedures. The humans listened politely and asked reasonable questions about equipment and positioning. But as the briefing ended, Ji-won noticed something strange. The humans spent time examining parts of the colony layout that seemed unimportant. They asked about ventilation systems, power grid backups, and structural weak points. When she asked why these things mattered, Captain Minho just said they liked to be thorough. Later, Ji-won watched the humans prepare their equipment. This was where she expected to see their primitive nature. Instead, she found herself confused. Their weapons were maintained to perfect standards. Their gear was organized with military precision. They moved with the coordination of a unit that had worked together for years. But there were small things that bothered her. Sergeant Hyok carried extra equipment that was not on any standard list. Private Nari had modified her armor in ways that looked uncomfortable, but might serve purposes. Ji-won could not guess. Lieutenant Seok kept checking and rechecking systems that already showed green on all diagnostics. Is there something wrong with your equipment? She asked Captain Minho. No, everything's fine. We just like to be ready for surprises. There will be no surprises. The plan accounts for all variables. Minho looked at her with an expression she could not read. Plans are great, but sometimes the enemy doesn't read the plan. As the fleet moved toward Kepler 442b, Ji-won found herself thinking about the humans more than she expected. They seemed competent, but there was something underneath their professional behavior that made her uncomfortable. When they thought no one was watching, they talked quietly among themselves using words she did not recognize. She decided it was probably nervousness. This was their first major operation with the Galactic Council. They wanted to make a good impression. The night before the attack, Ji-won made her final checks and reviewed the battle plan one more time. Everything was perfect. The Vrak would be eliminated efficiently, the colony would be retaken, and these humans would see how real military forces operated. She went to sleep confident that tomorrow would be just another routine victory to add to her record. The morning of the attack, Ji-won woke before the scheduled time and made her way to the observation deck. Through the transparent metal, she could see Kepler 442b growing larger as their fleet approached. The planet looked peaceful from space, but she knew that thousands of rock warriors were waiting on the surface. She found Captain Minho already there, standing quietly and looking at the planet. This surprised her. Most soldiers slept as long as possible before a battle. You are awake early, she said. Couldn't sleep. Old habit. Minho turned to face her. Beautiful planet. Shame about the bugs. Ji-won studied his face, trying to understand his mood. Humans were difficult to read, but he seemed calm. Maybe too calm for someone about to face combat for the first time with unknown allies. You do not seem nervous, she observed. Should I be? Most species experience anxiety before battle. It is normal. Minho was quiet for a moment. We handle stress differently, I guess. They stood in comfortable silence until other crew members began moving through the corridors. The ship was waking up, preparing for the day's work. Ji-won excused herself to begin her final preparations. In the armory, she found the humans checking their weapons and equipment. This was standard procedure, but what she saw made her pause. Sergeant Hyok was cleaning a rifle that already showed perfect maintenance readings. He disassembled it completely, examined every part under magnification, then reassembled it with movements so practiced they looked automatic. The weapon is already in optimal condition, Ji-won told him. Yes, ma'am. Just making sure. Hyok's hands never stopped moving as he spoke. Private Nari was nearby, going through her gear for the third time since Ji-won had been watching. Each piece of equipment was checked, tested, and placed in exactly the same position it had been before. The young human's face showed complete concentration. Is there a problem with your equipment, Private? No problem. Just checking. Lieutenant Seok was running combat simulations on a portable device. The same simulation, over and over. Jiwan watched him complete it 12 times in a row, each time making tiny adjustments to his approach. "You have already mastered that scenario," she said. "There's always room for improvement," Siak replied without looking up. Corporal Jinwoo was updating his communication systems, testing frequencies and backup channels that probably would not be needed. When Jiwan asked about it, he just shrugged and said he liked to have options. All of this seemed like excessive caution to Jiwan. The battle plan was simple and had been proven many times, but she supposed it was better for allies to be too careful than too careless. The final briefing took place 2 hours before the attack. Jiwan's staff presented the latest intelligence on Vrak positions. Everything matched their predictions exactly. The enemy was positioned according to standard patterns using standard defenses following standard doctrine. "Any questions?" Jiwan asked after the briefing ended. Captain Minho raised his hand. "What if the Vrak have set traps?" "They do not use traps. They prefer direct confrontation." "What if some of our equipment fails?" "All equipment has been tested and certified. Failure probability is less than 1%. "What if they have reinforcements we don't know about?" Jiwan felt her patience thinning. "Captain, we have complete surveillance of the planet. There are no hidden forces." "Right. Just covering all the bases." But Minho did not look satisfied with her answers. After the briefing, Jiwan overheard the humans talking quietly in their own language. She knew some human languages but could not understand what they were saying. Their tone seemed serious, almost urgent. "Is there something you need to discuss?" she asked them. "Just going over our assignments," Captain Minho said, "making sure everyone knows their job." An hour before the attack, Jiwan made her final inspection of the forces. Her Alterian soldiers were ready, as always. Equipment perfect, formations precise, attitudes confident but professional. They had done this many times and knew exactly what to expect. The humans were ready too, but differently. They moved with a kind of energy that seemed barely controlled. Sergeant Hyok kept flexing his hands. Private Nari checked her weapons for the 100th time. Lieutenant Siok stared at the tactical displays with an intensity that made Jiwan uncomfortable. "Your soldiers seem tense," she mentioned to Captain Minho. "They're focused. It's how we get ready." "Ready for what? This is a routine operation." Minho looked at her with that unreadable expression again. "Every operation is routine until it isn't." 30 minutes before the attack, Jiwan noticed something that bothered her. The humans were talking to each other in ways that seemed like they were saying goodbye. Not the professional acknowledgments of soldiers about to work together, but personal messages between people who might not see each other again. Private Nari hugged Corporal Jinwoo and whispered something in his ear that made him nod seriously. Sergeant Hyok clasped hands with Lieutenant Siok and spoke words that sounded like a promise. Captain Minho touched each of his soldiers on the shoulder and looked into their eyes like he was memorizing their faces. "Captain Kim," Jiwan said, "you are acting as if this mission has high casualty probability. My calculations show minimal risk." "Calculations are good," Minho replied, "but sometimes the universe doesn't read the reports." 10 minutes before the attack, Jiwan saw something in the human's eyes that made her inner warning systems activate. It was not fear, which she had expected. It was not determination, which she had hoped for. It was something else entirely. Something hungry. She told herself it was probably just human battle preparation. Different species had different ways of getting ready for combat. The Alterians used meditation and precise mental exercises. Maybe humans used emotional intensity, but as the countdown reached its final moments, Jiwan found herself wondering if she really understood what these creatures were capable of, the way they moved, the way they breathed, the way they looked at the tactical displays showing Vrak positions. It all suggested they were thinking about the coming battle very differently than she was. "All units, prepare for descent," came the announcement over the ship's communication system. Jiwan checked her equipment one final time and activated her command interface. Everything was ready. The plan was perfect. The enemy was predictable. Victory was certain. She looked at the humans one more time before they loaded into the transport ships. Captain Minho caught her eye and smiled, but there was something in that smile that made her think of predators. "See you on the surface, Commander," he said. As the transport ships launched toward the planet, Jiwon realized she was more nervous than she had been before any battle in her career. She told herself it was just the stress of working with unfamiliar allies. But deep down, she wondered if the real reason for her nervousness was that she was beginning to suspect these humans were not quite what they seemed to be. The first sign that something was wrong came 30 seconds after the transport ships landed. Jiwon's sensors showed Vrak positions exactly where they were supposed to be, following exactly the patterns they always used. Her first wave of soldiers moved forward with perfect coordination. Then the ground exploded. "Underground tunnels!" her tactical officer shouted over the communication system. "They're coming from below." Jiwon stared at her displays in shock. The Vrak had never used tunnel networks before. They were direct fighters who attacked from the front in massive waves. But now hundreds of them were emerging from holes that had not existed moments before. "Impossible," she whispered. Her first wave was being torn apart. Vrak warriors the size of ground vehicles were spraying acid that dissolved Alterian armor like paper. Flying Vrak drones were dropping explosive biopods that created toxic clouds. When they burst, everything was wrong. "Commander," Lieutenant Siok's voice came through her communication system. "We're seeing coordinated tactics down here. The Vrak are using team formations." Team formations. The Vrak had never used team formations in 3,000 years of recorded history. "Second wave, adjust for new enemy positions," Jiwon commanded, trying to salvage her strategy. But even as she spoke, more surprises erupted across the battlefield. The Vrak had bioweapons that her intelligence had never seen before, creatures that could change their shape to look like rocks, then spring up and attack from behind. Flying units that worked together to carry larger warriors over defensive lines. Acid spitters that fired in calculated patterns instead of random directions. "All units fall back to secondary positions," Jiwon ordered. It was the first retreat she had ever commanded, and the words felt strange in her mouth. That was when she heard Captain Minho's voice on the communication channel, calm and steady despite the chaos around them. "Alterian Command, this is human. Unit 1, we're seeing the new tactics too. Switching to Plan B." Plan B? Jiwon had never discussed a Plan B with the humans. Her plans did not need backup options because her plans always worked. "Captain Kim, what is Plan B? This was not in our briefing." "Sorry, Commander, forgot to mention it. We always have a Plan B." Through her command screen, Jiwon watched the human soldiers in the middle of the battlefield. Instead of retreating, with her forces, they were doing something she could not understand. They were advancing. Private Nari was surrounded by 6 Vrak warriors, each one capable of killing 3 Alterian soldiers. The young human should have been calling for backup or running for safety. Instead, she smiled. Actually smiled, like someone had just told her good news. Then Nari did something that made Jiwon's tactical computer crash from trying to calculate the probability of what she was seeing. The human private threw away her rifle and pulled out a knife against creatures with natural armor and acid weapons. But instead of dying instantly, Nari moved like liquid violence. She was faster than anything Jiwon had ever seen, slipping under Vrak attacks and finding weak points that should not have existed. Within 30 seconds, all 6 Vrak warriors were dead, and Nari was covered in their blood, still smiling. "How is that possible?" Jiwon asked no one in particular. "Experience," Captain Minho replied through the communication system, apparently hearing her question. "We've had lots of practice." Sergeant Hayek was cut off from his unit, trapped in a section of the mining facility with dozens of Vrak between him and safety. According to every military manual Jiwon had ever read, he should have found cover and waited for rescue. Instead, he charged deeper into enemy territory. The sounds that came from that section of the facility made even the Vrak pause their attacks. Screaming, crashing explosions, and other noises that Jiwon could not identify. When the sound stopped, Hyok's voice came through the communication system. "Area secured, continuing advance." "Sergeant, what is your casualty status?" Jiwon asked. "0 friendly casualties. 43 enemy eliminated. 43 Vrak, eliminated by one human soldier. In less than 5 minutes, Lieutenant Siak was coordinating an attack that no Alterian computer would approve. His plan involved splitting his small force into even smaller groups, attacking from multiple directions at the same time, and using tactics that gave each group a high probability of being killed. But it was working. The Vrak, who had been dominating the battlefield with their new strategies, suddenly found themselves confused and scattered. They kept trying to form their new, coordinated formations, but the humans would not let them. Every time a group of Vrak organized, human soldiers would appear from unexpected directions and break them apart. "Commander," Captain Minho called through the communication system, "we're going to clear a path to the main facility. Recommend your forces follow behind us and secure areas we clear." "Captain, the main facility is defended by hundreds of Vrak. Your unit has only 5 soldiers. Actually, we're down to 4 now. Corporal Jinwoo is busy." Jiwan checked her tactical display and found Jinwoo's position. He was alone in the communication center, but somehow he was jamming Vrak coordination signals while simultaneously calling in precise artillery strikes on targets that kept moving. How is he doing that? "Jinwoo's good with electronics," Minho said, like this explained everything. Through her command screen, Jiwan watched the humans fight their way toward the main facility. They moved like nothing she had ever seen before. Not like soldiers following training, but like predators following instincts that had been perfected over millions of years. When they encountered Vrak bioweapons, they adapted instantly. When they faced new enemy tactics, they responded with tactics that were even newer. When they ran out of ammunition, they used Vrak weapons against their owners. Private Nari grabbed a Vrak acid sprayer, somehow figured out how to operate it in seconds, and used it to dissolve through 3 tunnel walls, creating a new front where none should have existed. Sergeant Hayok found a way to turn Vrak explosive pods into shaped charges that could break through the facility's main doors. Lieutenant Seok started using Vrak communication signals to send false orders that split enemy forces and sent them to empty locations. "Commander," Captain Minho called, "we're at the main facility, ready to breach." "Captain, wait for backup. There could be hundreds of enemies inside. Probably. We'll handle it." The next 20 minutes were the longest of Jiwan's military career. She listened to communications from inside the facility, trying to understand what was happening. She heard explosions, screaming, and sounds that her computer could not identify. Then, suddenly, silence. "Human Unit 1. Report status," she called. "Mission accomplished," Captain Minho replied. "Facility secured. Enemy command structure eliminated. Colony is ours." Jiwan stared at her displays. According to her sensors, the entire Vrak force had been eliminated or scattered. The colony was indeed secure. The mission that was supposed to take 4 hours had been completed in 90 minutes, but the numbers did not make sense. 5 humans had eliminated a force that should have required hundreds of soldiers to defeat. "Captain Kim, what are your casualties?" "Minor injuries only, nothing serious." "And enemy casualties?" "All hostile forces neutralized." Jiwan sat in her command chair, trying to process what had just happened. Her perfect plan had failed completely. The enemy had been stronger and smarter than anyone predicted. Her forces had been forced to retreat, and 5 human soldiers had somehow turned a disaster into a victory. "Alterian Command," Captain Minho called. "Ready for your forces to move in and secure the area. Oh, and Commander, you might want to bring your medical team. Some of the Vrak survivors are going to need help." Survivors. The humans had left survivors. As Jiwan prepared to transport down to the colony, she realized that everything she thought she knew about warfare had just been proven wrong. More importantly, everything she thought she knew about humans had just been proven completely inadequate. She was beginning to understand that these creatures were not the primitive allies she had expected. They were something else entirely, something that made her very, very nervous. Jiwan's transport ship landed in what used to be the main courtyard of the mining facility. The area looked like a natural disaster had struck it, but she could see patterns in the destruction that suggested careful planning rather than random violence. Captain Minho was waiting for her, looking tired but satisfied. His uniform was torn and stained with substances she preferred not to identify, but he seemed uninjured. "Welcome to the colony, Commander," he said with that human smile that she was beginning to find disturbing. "Captain, I need to understand what happened here. My tactical computers are showing impossible results." "What specifically do you want to know?" Jiwan gestured at the destroyed buildings around them. "How did 5 soldiers eliminate a force of this size? My calculations show it should not be possible." "Your calculations assumed we would fight like Alterians," Minho replied. "We don't." He led her through the facility, and Jiwan saw the aftermath of whatever the humans had done. Frack corpses were arranged in patterns that showed they had been outmaneuvered and outfought by enemies, who understood their weaknesses better than they understood themselves. "Here's where Nari broke through their first defensive line," Minho said, pointing to a hole in the wall that looked like it had been melted from the inside. She used their own acid weapons against them, but in ways they never expected. How did she learn to use Vrak bioweapons? She didn't learn. She figured it out. Humans are good at adapting. They continued through the facility. Jiwan saw evidence of combat tactics that violated every rule she had ever been taught. Equipment had been used for purposes it was never designed for. Environmental features had been turned into weapons. Enemy strengths had been converted into weaknesses through methods that her tactical training said were impossible. "Captain, this level of improvisation suggests your soldiers have extensive experience with unknown enemy technologies." "We do. But humans have only been in space for a few decades. Where did you gain this experience?" Minho stopped walking and turned to face her. "Commander, how long has your species been at war?" The question confused her. "The Alterians have been defending ourselves for 3 centuries. Defending? Against external enemies. How long since you fought each other? We achieved planetary unity over 1,000 years ago. We do not fight among ourselves." "Right. Humans achieved planetary unity about 50 years ago. Before that, we spent our entire history fighting each other." Jiwan thought about this. "You mean civil wars? Internal conflicts?" "I mean everything. We fought with sticks and stones. We fought with metal weapons. We fought with explosives. We fought with chemical weapons, biological weapons, nuclear weapons. We fought in forests, deserts, mountains, oceans, cities, and space. We fought for territory, resources, ideas, and sometimes just because we were bored." The implications of this statement made Jiwan's mind reel. For how long? About 10,000 years of recorded history. Probably longer than that. They reached the main command center, where Lieutenant Seok was working with captured Vrak communication equipment. He had somehow integrated it with human technology and was using it to coordinate cleanup operations. "Lieutenant," Jiwan said, "how did you learn to operate enemy systems so quickly?" "Same way we learned everything else," Seok replied without looking up from his work. "Trial and error, mostly. Plus, all technology has similar basic principles once you understand the underlying concepts. But Vrak technology is biological. It should be completely incompatible with your systems. Biology and technology aren't that different. Both follow logical rules. You just have to figure out what the rules are." Sergeant Hyok approached them, carrying what looked like a Vrak weapon that had been modified with human components. "Commander, we found something interesting in the lower levels." He led them to an area that Jiwan's map showed as unused storage space. But when they arrived, she saw that the Vrak had converted it into some kind of research facility. They were studying human military history, Hyok explained, showing her computer displays that had been translated into Galactic Standard language. "Looks like they've been analyzing our combat methods for months." Jiwan read the displayed information with growing alarm. The Vrak had detailed analysis of human warfare, including historical battles, tactical innovations, and psychological profiles of human soldiers. They had been preparing specifically to fight humans. "Captain Kim, if they knew your methods, how did you still defeat them?" "Because knowing about something and understanding it are different things," Minho replied. "They studied our history, but they made the mistake of thinking they could predict what we would do. And they could not? Commander, humans have been fighting each other for 10,000 years. We've tried every possible way to kill, defend, attack, retreat, ambush, siege, and survive. Every strategy you can imagine, we've used it. Every strategy we've used, we've also learned to counter. Private Nari joined them, looking pleased with herself. Found their breeding facility, she announced. Destroyed the Queen's communication implants and convinced her to order the remaining forces to surrender. You convinced her? Jiwan asked. How? Explained that humans don't take prisoners when we're angry. Showed her some historical examples. She decided cooperation was better than extinction. Jiwan felt something cold move through her body. Historical examples? Pictures from our wars. Tends to be pretty convincing. They continued their tour of the facility. Everywhere Jiwan looked, she saw evidence of human problem-solving that went beyond anything she had imagined possible. They had turned defensive positions into traps. They had used enemy weapons better than their designers had intended. They had found weaknesses in Vrak biology that Vrak themselves did not know existed. Captain, I must ask, are all human soldiers capable of this level of combat effectiveness? This level? No. My team is pretty good, but they're not special forces or anything, just regular infantry with standard training. Standard training includes learning to operate alien technology and psychological warfare. Standard training includes learning to adapt to any situation and use whatever resources are available. The specific techniques vary, but the basic approach is always the same, which is survive first, win second. Everything else is details. In the medical bay, Jiwan found Corporal Jinwoo treating wounded Vrak with the same care he would give to human patients. This surprised her, given what she had seen of human combat methods. Corporal, why are you helping enemy soldiers? War's over, Jinwoo replied simply. No point being cruel to prisoners. But during the battle you showed no mercy. During the battle they were trying to kill us. Now they're not. Different situation, different response. The casual way he said this made Jiwan realize something disturbing. The humans had not been fighting in anger or fear. They had been fighting as a job, something they did because it needed to be done. The violence had been professional, not personal. Later, as they prepared to transfer control of the colony to Galactic Council administrators, Captain Minho found Jiwan sitting alone in the command center. Something bothering you, Commander? Captain, your species terrifies me. Why? Because you are too good at war. Because you treat combat like art instead of necessity. Because you can switch between extreme violence and casual mercy without effort. Minho sat down across from her. Commander, can I tell you something about humans? Please. We didn't become good at war because we wanted to. We became good at war because we had to. Every human alive today is descended from ancestors who survived everything our planet could throw at us. Natural disasters, climate changes, predators, diseases, and each other. And this made you into what you are today? This made us into survivors. Everything else is just application of survival skills to new situations. Jiwan looked at the displays showing the peaceful colony, now cleared of enemies and ready for normal operations. Captain, what would happen if humans ever fought a war where survival was truly at stake? Minho was quiet for a long moment. I hope we never find out, Commander. For everyone's sake. As Jiwan prepared her mission report that night, she realized she had no idea how to explain what she had witnessed. The humans had not just won a battle. They had demonstrated capabilities that changed her understanding of what was possible in warfare. More importantly, they had shown her what her species would face if humans ever decided that cooperation was not in their best interests. For the first time in her career, Commander Jiwan went to sleep hoping that she would never have to fight against the allies she had just fought beside. 3 days after the battle, Jiwan was still trying to write her mission report. Every time she described what the humans had done, her computer flagged the statements as requiring verification because they seemed impossible. She had taken to walking through the colony during her free time, trying to understand what had really happened. The physical evidence was clear, but the implications made her uncomfortable. In the lower levels of the mining facility, she found Sergeant Hyuk teaching a group of young Alterian soldiers about improvised weapons. He was showing them how to turn mining equipment into defensive systems. The key is to think about what something does, not what it was designed to do, he was saying. Everything can be a weapon if you understand its properties. One of the Alterian soldiers raised a hand. Sergeant, this mining laser was built for precision cutting. How can it be used for combat? Watch, Hayek said, adjusting the device's settings. Change the focus, modify the power output, add a targeting system made from spare parts, and now, you have a directed energy weapon that can cut through Vrak armor. But the manual says not to modify the focus settings. Manuals are written by people who assume you'll use things normally. In combat, normal gets you killed. Jiwan watched the demonstration with growing unease. The humans were not just good at fighting. They were good at turning anything into a way to fight. They looked at peaceful objects and immediately saw weapons. They looked at defensive systems and saw attack opportunities. Later, she found Private Nari in the medical bay, helping with the wounded Vrak prisoners. The young human was gentle and careful with the injured creatures, showing no sign of the violence she had displayed during the battle. Private Nari, may I ask you something? Of course, Commander. During the battle, you seemed to enjoy the combat, but now you are showing kindness to the same enemies. I do not understand this contradiction. Nari thought for a moment before answering. It's not contradictory. During the fight, my job was to stop them from killing my friends. Now my job is to help them heal. I do whatever job needs doing. But the transition seems so easy for you. Commander, have you ever had to hunt for food? The question surprised G1. No, our food is produced by automated systems. On Earth, humans hunted animals for thousands of years. You learn to kill quickly and cleanly, but you also learn to respect what you kill. Violence and compassion aren't opposites, they're both just tools. This explanation disturbed Jiwan more than she wanted to admit. The humans were not cruel, but they were not exactly kind either. They were practical in ways that felt alien to her understanding of morality. In the communications center, she found Lieutenant Siok analyzing Vrak military data with the help of Corporal Jinwoo. They had broken the enemy's encryption systems and were studying their strategic planning. What have you learned? Jiwan asked. The Vrak have been preparing for war with humans for 6 months, Siok reported. They studied our military history, analyzed our tactics, and developed specific countermeasures for human combat methods. Yet you still defeated them easily. Because they made a fundamental error, Jinwoo explained. They assumed that studying our past would let them predict our future, but humans don't repeat tactics, we evolve them. Siok pointed to data on his screen. Look at this. They prepared for human soldiers to use aggressive frontal assaults because that's what we did in some historical battles. They prepared for guerrilla warfare because we did that too. They prepared for technological superiority because we've used that when we had it. So they were ready for everything? They were ready for everything we had done before, but we didn't do anything we had done before. We did new things. Every battle teaches us something new, Jinwoo added. Every enemy shows us new possibilities. The Vrak thought they could study us like a science experiment. But war isn't science, war is art. That evening, Ji-won found Captain Minho sitting alone in the facility's main corridor, looking at a small device in his hands. As she approached, she saw it was displaying pictures of what appeared to be human children. Your family? She asked. My daughter. She's 7 years old. Minho's voice was soft, different from his professional tone. She wants to be a doctor when she grows up. You seem to care about her very much. More than anything else in the universe. Ji-won sat down beside him. Captain, may I ask you something personal? Sure. How do you balance being a soldier with being a father? How do you switch between violence and love? Minho looked at the picture for a long moment. Commander, everything I do as a soldier is because I'm a father. I fight so she doesn't have to. I learn to kill so she can learn to heal. I become dangerous so she can be safe. But does the violence not affect you? Of course it affects me. Every fight changes you a little. Every enemy you defeat teaches you something about yourself that you might not want to know. What did this battle teach you? That the galaxy is more dangerous than most species realize. that there are threats out there that will require humans to be what we're capable of being. And that scares me, because what we're capable of being is not always what we want to be. The next morning, Jiwan attended the final briefing before the human unit returned to their ship. She had expected a normal military debriefing, but what she experienced was something else entirely. The humans discussed the battle with clinical precision, analyzing their own performance and identifying areas for improvement. They talked about killing with the same tone other species use to discuss maintenance schedules. Nari, your close quarters technique in Section 7 was effective, but you took unnecessary risks, Captain Minho said. Understood. I should have used the acid weapon earlier instead of trying to conserve it. Hyuk, your improvised explosives worked well, but the timing was too close. You nearly caught Seok in the blast radius. I'll adjust the fuse calculations. For next time. They discussed the enemy casualties like a mathematics problem. They analyzed the effectiveness of their psychological warfare tactics like engineers reviewing technical specifications. They planned improvements to their methods, like artists perfecting their craft. Commander, Captain Minho said, turning to her, we want to thank you for the opportunity to work with Altarian forces. Your soldiers are skilled and professional. The gratitude is mine, Captain. Your unit achieved objectives that should have been impossible. Just doing our job. But Jiwan realized that was the problem. For humans, this level of violence was just a job. They could turn it on and off like a machine. They could be efficient, killers in the morning and gentle caregivers in the afternoon, and the transition required no effort. As the human transport ship prepared to leave, Jiwan stood in the observation deck watching them go. She had learned more about warfare in 3 days than she had in 3 decades of military service. She had also learned that humans were not the primitive newcomers most of the galaxy believed them to be. They were apex predators who had learned to disguise their nature behind civilization and diplomacy. The most disturbing part was not what they had done to the Vruk. The most disturbing part was how easily they had done it, and how little it seemed to affect them afterward. Jiwan began working on her mission report again, but she knew that most of it would be classified at the highest levels. The galaxy was not ready to know what humans were really capable of, but she would know. She would remember. And she would spend the rest of her career wondering whether having humans as allies was the galaxy's greatest fortune or its most terrible mistake. As the human ship disappeared into hyperspace, Jiwan realized that she had learned to fear her own allies more than her enemies, and that she suspected was exactly what the humans wanted. 6 months after the Kepler 442b operation, Commander Jiwan had become the Galactic Council's primary liaison to human military forces. It was not a position she had requested, but her experience made her the obvious choice. She was one of the few military officers who had fought alongside humans and lived to understand what that meant. Her office on the council station was filled with classified reports that all told the same story. Every species that encountered humans in combat now requested Altarian observers, not to protect the humans but to witness what happened and report back. The galaxy needed credible witnesses to believe what humans could do. Today she was reviewing the latest incident report. A joint operation against pirates in the Rigel system had gone wrong when the pirates used new weapons and tactics. The Centaurian forces had been overwhelmed and were preparing to retreat when the human unit took over. 3 hours later, the pirate fleet was completely destroyed. Their base was captured, and their leadership was in custody. The human casualties were minimal. The psychological impact on the pirates who survived was severe enough to require medical treatment. Commander Jiwan. Her assistant's voice came through the communication system. Captain Kim is here for his appointment. Send him in. Captain. Minho entered her office looking exactly the same as he had 6 months ago. Professional, calm, and carrying that subtle air of controlled danger that she had learned to recognize in all human military personnel. Captain, please sit down. How was the Rigel operation? Routine, Minho replied, settling into the chair, across from her desk. The pirates were using stolen council technology, but they didn't understand how to integrate it properly. Made them predictable. The Centaurian commander described your tactics as unprecedented in their brutality. The Centaurian commander was about to lose his entire fleet because he was too polite to fight dirty. Sometimes you have to hurt people to stop them from hurting others. Jiwan opened her computer files and showed him the psychological evaluation reports from the captured pirates. Minho, these individuals are suffering from severe trauma. Several of them have requested to be transferred to maximum security facilities because they're afraid of being in open spaces. Pirates who terrorize civilians for a living are afraid of open spaces. That sounds like a success to me. What did you do? To them, we showed them what happens when you prey on innocent people. Some lessons have to be taught with experience. Jiwan closed the files. She had learned not to ask for details about human combat methods. The answers were always disturbing, even when the results were positive. Captain, I need to discuss something with you. The Council is receiving requests from 12 different species for human military advisors. They want to learn your methods. And I'm not sure that's a good idea. Minho leaned back in his chair. Why not? Because your methods work by being unpredictable and adaptive. If everyone learns them, they stop being effective. More importantly, not every species should have access to human-level combat capabilities. Worried about an arms race? I'm worried about what happens when species that are not naturally predators try to fight like predators. They might lose more than they gain. Minho was quiet for a moment. What do you recommend? Continued cooperation but limited knowledge transfer. Humans work with other species, but human combat methods remain human secrets. The Council agrees with this. The Council doesn't know enough about human capabilities to understand the risks, but they're learning. Jiwan activated another file on her computer. 3 weeks ago, the Andromedan Collective demanded that humans be restricted from certain types of military operations. They claim human methods violate their ethical standards. What did the Council say? They said that ethics are a luxury that can only be afforded by species that are strong enough to defend themselves. The Andromedans didn't like that answer. I can imagine. Minho, can I ask you something personal? Sure. Do you ever worry that humans are becoming too good at war? That you might lose the ability to be anything else? Minho looked out the window, at the stars beyond the station. Every day. But the alternative is worse. Which is? Being too weak to protect the people we care about. Commander, humans learned a long time ago that peace is only possible when good people are strong enough. To stop bad people, everything else is just hoping for the best. Jiwan's communication system activated. Commander, urgent message from the Council chambers. Excuse me, Captain. She activated the message display. The news was what she had been dreading for months. A species called the Hegemony had declared war on the Galactic Council. They were technologically advanced, militarily experienced, and had a reputation for being utterly ruthless in combat. Worse, they had specifically stated that their primary target was humanity. They wanted to eliminate what they called the predator species, before humans could become a threat to their expansion plans. Captain, Jiwan said, turning back to Minho. We have a problem. Minho read the message display and Jiwan saw something change in his expression. It was subtle, but she had learned to recognize the signs. Captain Minho was shifting from diplomatic mode to combat mode. How large is their fleet? He asked. Approximately 10,000 ships. Their army numbers in the millions. They have weapons that can destroy planets. And they want to fight humans specifically? Yes. Minho stood up and walked to the window. Commander, I need to make some calls. How long before they reach Council space? Intelligence estimates 6 weeks. That's not very long. Captain, the Council is terrified. No one has fought the Hegemony before. But their reputation suggests they're more dangerous than any enemy we've faced. Good. The single word made Jiwan's blood turn cold. Good? Commander, for 6 months, you've been worried about what humans are capable of when we're not holding back. The Hegemony just gave us permission to stop holding back. Captain, what are you saying? Minho turned away from the window and looked at her with eyes that reminded her of the moment before the battle at Kepler 442b. I'm saying that up until now, humans have been playing nice because we wanted to be good neighbors. But if someone wants to hunt us, they're going to learn why we're the species that turned hunting into an art form. Minho, the casualties could be enormous, yes, for them. Over the next several hours, G1 watched as the human military machine activated. Captain Minho made calls to Earth, and within minutes, human ships throughout the galaxy began moving toward Council space. But these were not the small units like Minho's team that had been working with Council forces. These were fleets carrying hundreds of thousands of human soldiers, along with weapons and equipment that had never been seen before. Captain, G1 asked, how many military personnel do humans have? Active duty, about 50 million. Reserves, another 200 million. Why 50 million soldiers? Commander, humans have been preparing for war our entire history. When we joined the Council, we didn't stop preparing. We just started preparing for different kinds of war. The next day, G1 received reports from Council intelligence that changed her understanding of humanity forever. The human ships approaching Council space were not just military vessels. They were weapons platforms designed for types of warfare that no other species had imagined. Ships that could phase in and out of normal space. Weapons that could target enemy psychology as well as enemy bodies. Soldiers who had been trained, not just to fight, but to break enemy spirit so completely that surrender became preferable to continued resistance. Captain Kim, she said during their next meeting, the Council leadership is asking me to assess human military capabilities for strategic planning purposes, but I'm realizing that I never understood what those capabilities really were. What do you want to know? Everything. What are humans really capable of when you stop being careful? Minho looked at her for a long moment. Commander, do you remember what I told you about human history? 10,000 years of warfare? Yes. We didn't spend 10,000 years learning how to fight. We spent 10,000 years learning how to win. There's a difference. Explain. Fighting is about tactics and techniques. Winning is about understanding your enemy so completely that you can predict their actions, exploit their weaknesses, and break their will to resist. Humans don't just defeat enemies. We convince them that resistance is futile. And against the hegemony? The hegemony thinks they're going to hunt humans, but they've made a fundamental error, which is, they assume that because we joined the Council peacefully, we've become peaceful. They don't understand that humans don't become peaceful. We just choose when to be violent. G1 stared at him. Captain, you're talking about destroying an entire civilization. No. I'm talking about teaching them that some prey is too dangerous to hunt. The hegemony will survive this war, but they'll never threaten anyone again. As the days passed and the human fleet approached, G1 began to understand that she had been asking the wrong questions for months. She had been wondering whether humans were dangerous allies. The real question was whether the galaxy was ready for humans to stop pretending to be civilized. On the day before the first battle with the hegemony, G1 received a final report from Captain Minho.